Abraham Maslow said, in any given moment, we have two options: step forward into growth or step back into safety.
Relentless, commonly defined as oppressively constant, determined, showing no abatement of severity, intensity, strength, or pace. I believe relentless is an ethos. You're not stopping until you get what you want. You're not taking no for an answer. No obstacle will deter you from your goals. Relentless mentality is where we get to tap into the mindset of change agents, leaders, and icons. My hope is that their stories will inspire and motivate others to transform their mentality in their profession, their personal life, and ultimately their communities. So remember, when it's tough, will you give up or will you be relentless?
Super excited to have Heidi Jannenga on our show today. Dr. Jannenga, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
So Dr. Jannenga is the co-founder and president of WebPT, the country's leading rehab therapy EMR platform. Since the company's launch in 2008, Heidi has guided WebPT through exponential growth. Today, it's the fastest growing physical therapy software in the country, employing nearly 500 people and serving more than 75,000 therapy professionals at more than 12,000 clinics. Heidi's been recognized for a lot of things, just a couple to names. Recognized as the Health Data Management's most powerful women in healthcare IT, Entrepreneur of the Year finalist by Ernst Young, Most Admired Leader in Tech and Tech Titan by the Phoenix Business Journal, as well as Spirit of Enterprise, where I actually met you last summer. You guys won that award as well. You serve on numerous boards, including the Arizona Science Center, Support My Club, the Physical Therapy Political Action Committee, the Institute for Private Practice Physical Therapy, Conscious Capitalism, and the Arizona Community Foundation. And you dedicate a lot of your time to mentorship through women's empowerment groups and the broader community. And I'm just really excited to have you on.
Thank you. Gosh, when you read the list, it's like, whoa.
And I know you started as a basketball player. So we have like this basketball thing. Our families both have basketball in our blood, and so.
That's right. Yeah, I played at UC Davis.
Okay.
For 4 years, and that was awesome times.
Yeah. So I heard the story. You played basketball, got injured, and that kind of led you into the physical therapy passion. Is that?
Right. So I was actually pre-med, going into UC Davis, premier medical school in the country, and I was playing basketball, and injured my knee my junior year. Went down with a partial ACL tear, and MRI was kind of inconclusive, so they didn't want to do surgery, so they sent me to physical therapy. And I had spent a lot of time, which I'm sure you're familiar with, in the training room, but really had never understood what physical therapy was. Had an amazing therapist, got me back and actually playing that year with a brace, and then played my senior year with no brace, fully 100%, no surgery needed. So. Changed my trajectory of interning and finding out more about the profession, and fell in love with it and went on to PT school after I graduated from Davis.
Okay. So are you from Northern California as well?
No, I actually grew up in Florida.
Okay.
So
across the country?
Yeah, just outside of Orlando in a city called Winter Park. Went to Winter Park High School. We won the state championship my senior year.
Okay.
Yeah, in basketball. So
I got my St. Mary's championship stuff up there somewhere in here. Very cool.
Yeah.
So is your family anybody else in medicine or software or?
No, my dad was a scientist, so he was a research horticulturist.
Okay.
He worked for the U.S. Department of Agriculture for his entire career, pretty much. Got his PhD in pomology, which is fruit science, at Cornell. Actually had gone to the University of Hawaii prior to that, and that's where he met my mom.
Okay.
But nobody else in medicine. In my extended family, in my dad's side, there's a few physicians, but they live in Austria.
Okay.
So nobody locally, nobody sort of inspired me necessarily through familial knowing. It was really just my experiences through my college career.
Wow. So, the show is all about the mentality. So 2 questions, the athleticism, which I've had some other athletes on the show talk about their mindset. Where do you think that came from? And then kind of your work ethic going into, PT and being an entrepreneur, where do you think that stems?
Well, so let's talk about mindset first and foremost. I was raised by an Austrian father and a Japanese mother. Okay. And there is a tiger mom syndrome. The tiger mom is real. Yeah. Which, obviously I turned out pretty good. But I think the mindset was established very early in terms of discipline and hard work, work ethic being very important. and also achievement, right? Of having goals and really trying to accomplish them. And then I was a tomboy growing up. I grew up in a neighborhood where I was the only girl. That's a theme that's been throughout my life.
Yeah.
And so competitiveness and sort of, wanting to strive to be as good as the guys was also instilled early. And so thus the athletics. I've kind of just taken that sort of competitive edge, that competitive spirit, that hard work and ethic, and that's all sort of now part of my ethos and my core values of who I am today.
Okay.
And then sort of the second part, entrepreneurism, I never really thought about myself as like true what you think about, like the risk taker and, the person that's willing to just do anything. I think for me it was more about the problem solving side of an entrepreneur. When we first started WebPT and I was starting to get that label, I was like, wait a minute, like, I'm not sure if I fit sort of the mold. But as I looked back at my sort of career, there were a lot of sort of risks that I took. I ended up I went across country to UC Davis, like sight unseen. I actually had visited, but really hadn't been to California, didn't really know a lot about it, had no family there, and loved it, right? And then when I went to PT school, flipped back to the East Coast and Florida, back to Florida, did all of my internships in places that I never lived, loved that sort of reinventing myself and sort of taking that risk of jumping out there. When I got actually into my career, I started and launched a clinic inside of a college, which was kind of a new methodology of thinking, and took the leap of faith to lead that clinic and made it successful. So there was a lot of these little steps that I really didn't think necessary. They were calculated risk for me, but in the true entrepreneurial sense. And I didn't really have any of that in my family. My dad worked for the government for 5 years. My mom was for his entire career. My mom was a school teacher. Yeah. So I don't know where the risk taking necessarily outside of being pushed by them to try new things and never sort of be okay with your comfort zone.
So you're regarded in not only the healthcare IT space, but in the Arizona community as one of the most successful entrepreneurs. So I asked this question to a lot of entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Do you think it's more nature or nurture?
I personally, in my experience, it's been a little bit of both, but you have to have the the nature internally to let the nurturing work. Yeah. Right? And I have always been one to have this high adaptability quotient. So my spirit animal is a chameleon. Okay. And that's self-imposed, but as I've learned about myself, so as I can come into an environment and I can blend, right? I sponge, I learn a lot, and if it's something that I enjoy or find interesting, like I want to learn more, right? And I sort of really consume that pretty quickly. Part of that, I think, is being multiracial, right? So you blend in with lots of different communities, and as an athlete, I was also very good in academics. So I blended really well. I was hanging out with the nerds at the same time as the athletes. You know what I mean? I'm sure you can totally relate, right? Yes. And so that adaptability quotient, I think, has served me well. And so it's a silly answer, but I think it's a little bit of both. For me, it was a lot of nurturing. I don't know that I would have taken the leap of faith should it not have been for my co-founder Brad, who is more of that quintessential entrepreneur, that super risk taker. Like, he was willing to take that leap right out of the gate. For me, it was a little bit more of, okay, let's understand the market research. Let's understand a little bit more about the problem we're solving and making sure that it has legs before we take that leap. Sure. And so I think the blend of the two of us was really part of our success as well.
Okay. So you talked a little bit earlier about adversity, and when you hurt your knee is what really got you into PT. So and then you talked about starting your own practice within the college and moving into the WebPT space. So let's talk more about WebPT. And since you've been at WebPT and started the business with your co-founder Brad, what has been that biggest adversity moment where you guys were really hit with a barrier or obstacle that you really had to overcome and use some of the things that you learned previously? I think being an athlete really helps with that too, in terms of adversity and working with others and going through trials. You're in the trenches, you're training together. So what has been the biggest moment for you guys?
Well, there's been quite a few. I mean, we're celebrating our 10-year anniversary this year, right? And so the first one I would say is just as we started to grow and deciding to create the business was for me to leave my 15-year career as a physical therapist, right? At the top of my game, I checked off a lot of my goals for myself from a career perspective. I was treating professional college athletes, like had my referral base like tight. I was running a large practice that was super successful, like all those ticks, right, that you kind of want to do for yourself. And so jumping off into software, which you know, at that point, I don't know that Heidi Jannenga and technology were really said in the same sentence very often. And so taking that leap of faith to do this and believing in it, because it was truly solving a problem for me, was hard. So it was a point in time in which there was this convergence of becoming a mom, leaving this career that I was super, you know, engaged and comfortable in, and going into this place that was so unknown to me, right? And I was one of those people that wasn't super maternal, so I had never changed a diaper before my daughter was born.
I know that feeling too.
So yeah, so it was really tough for that first year to really sort of get my legs underneath me. But once I realized like that the things that I had learned over my career of becoming, you know, a leader and management and my leadership style, the culture that we'd created in my clinic, all of the, you know, financial acumen and business acumen that I had, you know, garnered over that time was immediately transferable into this new business, regardless of the actual industry that we were in,
Sure.
right? So the people-minded perspective, sort of the culture that we created, you know, and initially is always born out of the founders. And so between the two of us, like being able to create an environment in which we loved to come to work every day, didn't have the things that we had both experienced corporately in the past that we didn't want in our own company, all of those things were immediately transferable, right? Yeah. And so once I realized that, a lot of the confidence started coming in, and you get, you know, immediate feedback from the folks you've hired and things like that. So that was sort of one of the biggest, I think, initial milestones for me, was to say, you know what, I do belong here. I can do this regardless of, you know, my past experiences. A lot of those are transferable into what we're doing.
So taking that first leap of faith,
yeah,
getting over the fear factor of changing from one area of success and going to something completely unknown and new.
Exactly. And then I would say another one was when, you know, we had hit the ground running. We were starting to get a lot of traction. And we saw this sort of path of deciding, do we want to have, you know, a small piece of a big pie or a bigger piece of the pie ourselves, right? In terms of taking funding into the company to accelerate our growth, right? Do we want this to be a lifestyle business, or do we want to swing for the fences, right? And that's when we really actually dove in to do a little bit more market research. And at that time, and this was 2009, we found that 80% of therapists were still using pen and paper. So market opportunity was there. A lot of the regulations were starting to align, right? The Affordable Care Act had just been passed to sort of make the mandate towards use of electronic medical record. High Tech Act, exactly. So we decided, you know what, there's a lot of opportunity. We have the response from the industry. They want our product. It's resonating. We're going to do this. So we took funding in from a local angel group, Canal Partners, and, you know, hit the ground running to accelerate our growth. And we, you know, turned their $1 million into 18 in 2 years. And then we had another sort of set inflection point of taking a second round of funding in. And we'd been running, you know, obviously the company then for 6 years. And again, seeing exponential growth, but also seeing an opportunity for even more growth through potentially M&A or others. So in 2014, we took funding in from Battery Ventures, which was a big deal, Silicon Valley company, venture company coming in and investing in a healthcare IT company here in Arizona, which is not common at the time. I mean, we're becoming obviously a lot more of an icon city for that. But yeah, and we decided at that point that we were going to give up 51% of the company. So that was a big deal.
Yeah.
and lots of deliberation, lots of negotiation. But at that point, it's all about crowning the company, right? The company becomes bigger than you as a founder, and really understanding what is the opportunity, what is the impact that you're going to have. And for me, as a physical therapist, disrupting my own industry, who gets to do that?
Yeah.
And so we took that leap of faith and haven't looked back. They've been fantastic partners with us. And obviously now we're own just over a third of the market. About 40% of the market is now using WebPT.
Wow, in 10 years. That's
10 years.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
That's a heck of a story. So you talked a little bit about you and Brad being different. I was hoping you could talk about that, because I think people have this pie-in-the-sky view of entrepreneurship, like there's never going to be a lot of friction between you and your partners, and you're always going to see eye to eye, and you're going to start this business and 10 years later do all the things you guys did without having any battles. You have some things where you don't agree and you have to align with each other, and it sounds like he's more the visionary and you're doing more of the integration, and how do you guys complement each other? How have you worked through those personality differences to achieve this type of success?
So early on, those differences actually were part of our strengths, because I had the domain of physical therapy, and as a subject matter expert, he had the domain of technology, and our intersection was the company, right? And so that was really great, so that you weren't stepping on each other's toes, right? We had very similar philosophies in terms of what we wanted the business to be like internally, like the culture. So that was good too, right? We didn't really have a ton of conflict in that regard. Now the conflict is always in communication, right? And what becomes a priority to build, and it's really about for us was establishing a purpose, right, of what we're trying to accomplish, and then making sure that decisions were actually supporting that purpose, right? And as we continue to grow, something that people really give us a lot of credit for was having the wherewithal to understand what our strengths were, and really wanting to pile on to those, and knowing what you're not good at, and being willing to admit that and say, we're going to bring people in that actually complement us in the area that we don't feel comfortable with or aren't as strong in. And so when we took that first round of funding in 2010, we brought on a CEO who, had more of a process mind, metric minded, right? Sure. Who was going to take a lot of what we had accomplished, but then being able to, drive scalability, pull in more understanding of what's actually happening in the business in a more objective way, objective manner. From that point on, known as the trifecta.
Okay. Yeah.
But Brad and I were husband and wife building this company. We actually started the company in February 2008 and got married in May of 2008.
So you have even another dynamic of being husband and wife and working together, starting a baby as the company, and then having a baby too. Okay. Yes.
But unfortunately, when you talk about conflicts, the marriage has not survived the business. So. Fortunately or unfortunately, right? As we continue to grow, you evolve as people, and our differences became such that we couldn't continue as husband and wife. Brad left the business in 2014 as we took, and that was of his own intention. Like, he is also not only a visionary, but also loves the startup mode. Yeah. And so as we continued to grow into a larger and larger company, that wasn't his forte, right? He knew that about himself. And so as Battery came in, he was very transparent in wanting to, be able to not necessarily have to be in the day-to-day operations. He's still a shareholder of the business, and obviously valued as a co-founder.
Sure. So with your experience, it sounds like you have so many nuggets of advice, and I always ask people to come on and give some advice.
Yeah.
So of the things you've learned in your entire career, for folks who are watching this or listening to it on their phones, what advice would you give them in terms of pursuing their dreams? If they're a clinician that wants to start a business and become an entrepreneur, or if it is an entrepreneur who wants to start a healthcare or software IT company, or a husband and wife that are partnering together for the first time and starting something out of their own office in their house? Like, what type of advice would you give to somebody?
Well, first and foremost, I mean, I know that you know this, it's a grind, right? To think that it's easy or that you're, just going to stumble onto something. I mean, it took a lot of time to get to the place where we are. I mean, yes, it's 10 years and everybody says, oh my gosh, that's super fast. And that is super fast. Like, we are definitely not the norm, right? Understanding what it takes and being willing to set aside time, right? We talk a lot about, an inventor versus an entrepreneur, right? An inventor is somebody who has lots of ideas and maybe doesn't really actually get to execute them. An entrepreneur executes them, but also, most importantly, finds a way to sell it.
Yeah. So important you said that.
Yeah.
You cannot really be a successful entrepreneur without knowing how to sell.
Yes.
That was the first thing that was taught to me. Yeah. You have to learn how to sell. Yeah. So.
And so, I mean, you're building a business as an entrepreneur. That's what you're doing, right? And so you've got to have a product that resonates with somebody that they're willing to put a price tag on it and buy it. So that's one thing. It's a grind, right? Be prepared for having conflict. Be prepared for eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Be prepared for tough times to get through, and also have passion for what you're actually trying to build. Right? Or to build a business or whatever it is, have passion for it, because all of those hard times go away when you can really, you see traction that's happening and it's something that you're super passionate about. Yeah. Another thing I would say is, we talked a little bit about it, of being introspective and knowing who you are and knowing what your strengths are. I think too often as entrepreneurs, you get caught up in wanting to wear all the hats and not knowing which hat you really should have on for the longest period of time.
How did you figure that out? What tool did you use, or how did you?
So we use Strength Finders.
Okay.
Initially, I mean, that's a good tool to understand sort of the personality type, right, and helps with communication as well. But it's also just taking time to be introspective. Yeah. Because it's hard to say that you're not good at something, especially when you're competitive.
The ego, yeah.
Yeah, you get caught up in it pretty quickly. Yeah. And when you're getting success and all of that, you're like, no, this is me. Like, I did this. Like, why should I give that up? But taking the extra time to truly say, where are my strengths, and bringing people in that are smarter than you, and being willing to do that, right? That's what they always say about A players, right? A players bring in A players. Mm-hmm. If you're B player, you're going to bring in a C player, because you always want to try to be that A player, and you don't want anyone to think that you're not smart enough. Yeah. And so having the confidence and and understanding of who you really are and what you love to do, I think is important. And then offset that with people that love to do what you hate. Yeah. Because that's what's going to continue to motivate you on a daily basis to push through the grind. And then finally, I would say, don't be afraid to ask for help. Yeah. I think that's something that I, learned too late. Yeah. In trying to just take it all on. I think that was partly why, when that convergence happened, that it took me about a year to really get through that, and it was tough, because I was like, no, I've got this, right? I can do it all. And especially for a woman, I think that's something that we do a little bit too often. I would just say, just recognize that maybe sooner than, or being willing to admit it sooner than later, and things will probably go a little bit smoother. What helps you stay balanced now? With all the different things, you're pulled so many different directions. Yeah. How do you stay balanced? Part of it is I've established a tribe. I have an amazing group of friends that, we meet once a quarter, but we meet for lunch individually and things like that. But, they keep me in check. They're willing to call me on my bullshit and ask me questions that make me take a step back. I think that's super important. But also, you have to be reminded, because you get caught up in what you're passionate about, right? And I'm super passionate about what we're doing with WebPT, but my daughter is, the light of my life, and the one thing that nothing gets trumped when it comes to her. That's a commitment I've made to myself and a commitment I've made to her. Yeah. And so I live by a Google Calendar, and so there are block times on my calendar that are just non-negotiable, and that's, at the end of the day, what helps me to make sure that I'm staying balanced. But I meditate, I do yoga pretty consistently, keeping sort of the healthy side of me really helps with the mental aspects of all the rest of my life as well.
Okay. So you've done so much in the last 10 years. What's next for you in WebPT?
Well, there's so much more opportunity. We've created a platform. We're no longer just an electronic medical record anymore. We've, through acquisition and also through build, we have a patient retention management platform. We just made a really amazing acquisition this year. We almost doubled in size of our organization. So we now offer a very robust revenue cycle management component to our platform. And not only that, we've definitely moved up market with consolidation happening and everything. We knew we needed to evolve our platform to be able to be utilized by everyone in the industry. We initially came in the small business world, and so our SaaS product resonated really well with them. But now, cloud-based is everywhere, and so we're attacking the market head-on. So really increasing market share, looking for more opportunities. We don't just serve physical therapy. We have occupational therapy and speech-language pathology, so we call it the rehab therapist market, which is growing, and the sky's potentially behavioral health in the future. You never know.
Okay.
You never know. We're always looking for really great verticals that mesh with what we're doing. But laser focused and staying in our core competency has been one of our strengths, and really helped with our success. Again, one of those nuggets maybe for entrepreneurs to not try to serve everyone, like find a niche and really stick with it and kill it, and if you have the opportunity to, because that's really been part of our success. And again, we get accolades for that now. As part of our foundation of thinking.
Well, Heidi, we always end with a lightning round of a few questions, so they're going to come fast at you.
Okay.
So, what are you the most proud of?
My daughter, first and foremost, in how she's turning out. She's 7 years old already, and just an amazing human being. So first and foremost, my daughter. If you ask me about my business, I would say, again, it's people. We've created careers at WebPT. We still have employees that our first 10 employees are still part of who we are at 500. And so the people aspect and watching them grow and seeing their families grow and all of that for me is, again, something I'm most proud of from the business perspective.
Okay. Who inspires you now?
I always have to go back to my dad. My dad passed away in January of this year. He's been a force for me obviously from the very beginning, in terms of everything that he was able to accomplish, being a naturalized citizen, coming to the U.S., losing his father in World War II, like a lot of different things of adversity, but it never he never wavered from his drive and sort of wanting to do what he wanted to do in his life. And so he's always been a shining light for me from a work ethic and goal perspective. So
last question, what motivates you now to get out of bed in the morning?
The opportunity for continued disruption in my industry. One of the big things that we are now talking about is the 90% of patients out there that have musculoskeletal diagnoses but never get to see a physical therapist.
Wow.
So physical therapists are continuing to fight over this 10% of people, right? And there's so much more opportunity for us to be the lower cost, higher value provider for these folks, right? So right now with the opioid epidemic that's happened, a huge number of those folks are taking or being prescribed medications because of pain. That is one of the biggest aspects that PT can help with, especially musculoskeletal pain. And so helping to drive new clinical pathways with insurance companies, helping to educate more primary care providers to understand, don't just write a script, like you've got other alternative providers that can really help and make a difference for long-term outcomes with these folks. And so not only making a difference within our own industry, but now really, growing that to the patient aspect of growing the brand of physical therapy and rehab therapy, and helping more people. I got into physical therapy because I wanted to help people, and now I have the opportunity to help so many more. So that's what motivates me every day.
Awesome. Heidi, thank you for everything you do for the business community, for disrupting healthcare. You're inspiration to me and many others that are watching as well and rooting you guys on. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. It was an honor to be here.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed what you saw today, please subscribe in the links below. And remember, never to quit, always be relentless.